Central Michigan fans are in absolute shambles because of the reports coming out of Ann Arbor. They are absolutely glorious. No one can stop talking about Bryce Underwood. It's getting real, guys. I'm just going to tell you. And you might be wondering, why Central Michigan fans, though? Because that doesn't make any sense. And you're absolutely right. It doesn't make sense. But I figured it would be better to make fun of Central Michigan fans because yesterday I made fun of Eastern Michigan fans and an EMU fan actually got upset about it, which was crazy to me because I didn't realize EMU had fans. Nah, I'm just kidding. And also, he might have been joking. So honestly, dude, if you see this and you were joking, that's my bad. I feel really bad about that. But thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us. This is the Big Ten Team Rivalry Show where we talk basically very little about the Big Ten and a whole heck of a lot about Michigan. Thank you so much for 1,719 subscribers. There's something like 86% of you that are not subscribed. So if you don't mind hitting the like button, maybe even subscribing, possibly even sharing the show with your friends. And don't forget to join us Wednesday nights at 8:30. We'd love to see you in the chat. Michigan has an XFactor, and his name is Bryce Underwood. This coming from Isaiah Hole at Wolverines Wire. And I gotta say, Wolverines Wire, you know, I love Isaiah Hole. I think he's great. The amount of ads on this page are ridiculous. And I'm saying that as someone who works in advertising. Like, are you trying to give your user base ad fatigue? Because that's a real thing. It happens. ESPN crowns Bryce Underwood as Michigan's 2025 X Factor. Says Isaiah Hole, the Wolverines will still smash. He goes into the 2024 season a little bit, but the Wolverines will still smash, as head coach Sharon Moore would say. But with the hire of offensive coordinator Chip Lindsey, the playbook will have much more of a downfield passing attack, perhaps in opposition to the Jim Harbaugh West Coast offense style that we've tended to see in Ann Arbor, which is kind of interesting that they call it a West Coast style offense that Jim Harbaugh had at Michigan, because if I remember correctly, the Pac-12 was known for throwing the ball basically everywhere. It didn't really matter whether or not the receiver caught it, and that's why the Pac-12 leads basically everybody in offensive turnovers, interceptions. And actually, I have no idea if that's true. I'm just making a joke. But Jim Harbaugh comes to Michigan and decides not to throw the ball at all. Now, you know, maybe that's back in the day West Coast style offense, but I would have thought that that was traditional Big Ten style offense, but we'll just move on from that. Given the defense was stellar throughout much of the 24 campaign, the Maize and Blue success this season should be on, or much of the Maize and Blue success this season will be on the offensive side of the ball, or at least should be. ESPN says this about Bryce Underwood. Underwood's high-profile commitment flip from LSU to Michigan was among the biggest in the NIL era. The Wolverines also brought in Mikey Keene through the transfer portal. Keene has thrown for 8,245 career yards, 65 touchdowns during stints at Fresno State and UCF. But Underwood has the talent that could turn Michigan into a playoff contender. No pressure. That's a lot to ask of a true freshman, you don't freaking say. But Underwood isn't an ordinary freshman, and this is kind of the point that a lot of people have been making about him. The top-rated pocket passer in the 25 class, Underwood won 2 state titles in Michigan and went 50-4 as the starter at Belleville High School. Man, if I were on the team of one of those teams that got one of those 4 against Belleville, I don't know. I don't know if they have any like memorabilia from the game, but that's got to be worth something. I beat Bryce Underwood in high school. Like, dude. The Wolverines struggled to throw the ball last year. Underwood could immediately change that in 2025 if he wins the job. And that's kind of funny to me, if he wins the job. If Underwood doesn't win the job at this point, do we panic? Because here's the thing. We've said this a lot about Bryce Underwood. He's a true freshman. So how much of an expectation, or how big are the expectations that we can really have of Bryce Underwood coming into the 2025 campaign? Should we maybe temper those expectations? Should we pump the brakes a little bit? He hasn't actually even won the job, and is that because he's not good enough, or is that because they're not announcing a quarterback? Obviously, it's the latter. They're not announcing a quarterback until closer to the season, for sure. I mean, we still got to get through fall camp. I don't think that it's fall camp, late summer camp, whatever. I don't think it's even started yet. But in any case, Here's the point that I think is really interesting about Bryce Underwood, or about what we should expect of Bryce Underwood. Because we've got these expectations that he's going to be, otherworldly, like it says right here. But does he really need to be? And Isaiah Hole kind of gets into this. So Underwood doesn't even need to be otherworldly, as some might claim, given that Michigan's identity from 21 to 23, and even in 2018, is to play complementary football. Underwood just needs to be efficient and relatively mistake-free. With J.J. McCarthy leading the charge, most games started out with the offense driving the field before relying on stellar defensive play. Thus, P.J. Fleck and Joel Klatt popularized the saying that the Wolverines were a boa constrictor. And that's absolutely true. And I don't think that identity for Michigan is really going to change. I mean, you look at what happened when Rich Rod came into Michigan and tried to bring in a whole new football identity. It didn't mesh. And honestly, and we've talked before about how Lloyd Carr kind of sabotaged things, and that's a little bit of a crappy situation. But either way, Michigan has an identity. I don't think they're going to get away from that. I don't think that Sharon Moore, even though he's an offensive guy, I don't think they're going to get away from that identity of really winning games with their defense, because their defense is good. I mean, here's the thing. Even with an 8-4 season, they still shut down Ohio State's best season ever. And they shut down Jalen Milroe. And I understand that that's probably not as much of a flex as it was maybe in his junior or even sophomore year. I don't know. But that being said, it's still a thing. The fact that, Underwood doesn't actually need to be this amazing quarterback for Michigan to make a run in the CFP. I mean, heck, you had J.J. McCarthy, who is arguably one of Michigan's best quarterbacks ever. And yet, was he actually used to his full potential? Heck, no, he was not. He was never 100% on his game because Michigan didn't need him to be. Michigan had their identity in the offensive line. That's where Michigan wins football games. Now, I wanted to get into a little bit more about Bryce Underwood here real quick. Just some of the context around him, some of the, and this is off this page. Man, with the ads, it's crazy. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about Bryce Underwood because they've got, ESPN labels him as the X-Factor of 2025. Now, J.D. Pickle of On3, I think that's how you pronounce his name. The K is capitalized, I think. So I don't know. From On3 argued that Michigan won't unlock Chip Lindsey's new offense without Underwood starting, calling him the most exciting option over veteran Mikey Keene. I mean, yeah, he's got the legs, he's got the arm, he's got the build. There's everything there. He's apparently already got the maturity. It's just, does he have the mental fortitude? Can he walk out into Michigan Stadium with 115,000 people all screaming his name and putting their hopes and prayers on this one 17-year-old kid? Obviously, that's not exactly how it's going, and hopefully Bryce Underwood knows that if he makes a mistake, it's okay, just get back out there. I mean, there are going to be trolls yelling and screaming at you all day long. Armchair quarterbacks are everywhere, so he needs to just tune that kind of stuff out. Can he do that is the real question. Head coach Sharon Moore praised Underwood's processing ability and humility, noting that his rapid growth in understanding complex playbooks and huddle procedures was incredible. So I added a little bit of editorialization there at the end. I think that's the right word. But the fact is that Sharon Moore himself is already praising Underwood's ability and humility. Now, here's what I think is interesting about it, because you have a lot of rival fans say that last season they all said, Davis Warren and Alex Orji especially, were going to be these incredible quarterbacks, and Michigan wasn't going to skip a beat on offense, and then all of a sudden they skipped a beat on offense. Is that kind of the same thing that we're seeing here with Bryce Underwood? I see it a couple of different ways. I mean, Isaiah Hole has said before that you can kind of pick up on coach speak. When coaches say things like, yeah, we're really excited about the talent we have, and, kind of keeps it really generic. Oh, yeah, they're putting in the work every day. Everybody's working really hard and stuff like that. That generic language kind of, you kind of are left to read between the lines. And if you have real tangible results that are that positive and you don't want the pundits, the fans, to read in between the lines, then you're going to give them solid information, tight information that's, in between of the lines free. You're going to say things like, Bryce Underwood's really humble. He's processing things really, really well. He's learning complex playbooks. These are very specific praises that Underwood is getting. Now, look, I mean, I could be making the point that the more specificity in the amount of praise that Underwood's getting, the better, and the more realistic he is going to turn out to be a good quarterback, but that also might not manifest the way that we think it is. So we still have to just wait and see as Michigan fans. Now, The Athletic ranked Underwood as the 50th among 136th projected starters, placing him in a tier of young, unproven starters with high potential. Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, he's obviously unproven. He hasn't played a single snap of football yet. This is just weird having that ad right there. I'll move up a little bit. One scout from The Athletic said that he's the most talented quarterback I've ever watched. Literally has it all, but cautioned against starting him too early without a strong supporting cast. And in my opinion, I think that comes down to the offensive line. A lot of people are concerned about wide receivers, and I might get to that in just a second here, but in my opinion, the offensive line is really what's going to make or break Bryce Underwood's freshman season. If Underwood's got the time, if he doesn't feel like he needs to panic and get out of a bad situation, then maybe he has the time to make a decision, and that helps kind of build his confidence as the season goes on. That's not to say that he'll always make the right decision. In fact, I expect him to make the wrong decision many times here. But if the offensive line can give him time, can give him space, maybe Bryce Underwood decides to take off when he did actually have a receiver downfield. That's fine. If he takes off and he's got some grass, that's fine. We're talking about a situation where, maybe he only gains 5 or 6 yards where he could have actually gained 20. That sucks in terms of the long-term ramifications of beating better teams. But as Bryce Underwood is getting his confidence under him, go ahead, pick up 5 or 6 yards, because Michigan's offense is built to pick up 5 or 6 yards a play. At least it was. And it should be even with Bryce Underwood as the quarterback with that dual threat. I mean, the fact that he's a dual threat quarterback, the fact that he's got this good of an arm doesn't mean that Michigan's all of a sudden going to look at the running backs like, hey, we don't need you anymore. That's just not going to happen. So the big question then, his physical readiness. Underwood has bulked up to, holy crap, 220 pounds, and insiders say he's physically ready to handle Big Ten defenses. Sorry, my nose is a little itchy. His mobility is seen as a major asset compared to Mikey Keene, who's described as outright immobile. Man, I don't ever want to criticize the players like that. That's just gotta hurt. I'm sure Mikey Keene's doing the best he can. And look, it's not like he's a bad quarterback either. I mean, he's obviously got the experience. Yeah, he threw that pick 6 against Will Johnson last year, actually. But I don't think that Mikey Keene would necessarily be the worst thing to ever happen to Michigan at quarterback. I mean, we've had worse. And I'm not even talking about last season. And I will have absolutely no Alex Orji or Davis Warren slander in my comment section. So keep it to yourself. The big question then is this. Will Michigan roll the dice on Underwood's upside or lean on Mikey Keene's experience? Most analysts believe that Underwood gives them the best shot at a playoff run, even if it comes with growing pains. And that's really, that's the big question, isn't it? Do you take the chance that Bryce Underwood is just a little bit too new? He has, he's still got a little bit more of that shine on him. That shine hasn't really worn off yet. So do you take the chance at starting him too early, and he maybe makes mistakes, and when he makes those mistakes, does he spiral? And does it just get worse? And does it get worse to the point where he feels like he can't get better and then feels like he needs to transfer out of Michigan because at that point, the fans are all yelling at him and the expectations are gone. What happened to Bryce Underwood? He was supposed to be the savior of Michigan football, that kind of thing. Or do you just roll with it? It sounds like they are very confident that if they roll with Bryce Underwood, He's going to have some growing pains, but it's not going to be the type where he does spiral and then ends up transferring because he feels like he failed and has to get out of Michigan. I think that's probably what ends up happening. And I think that that's okay. I think that Michigan is allowed, or at least Bryce Underwood is allowed, some growing pains in this first season because, unfortunately, Michigan has done rather poorly in quarterback recruiting outside of J.J. McCarthy in these last couple of classes. Now, they do have Jaden Davis, but Jaden Davis, unfortunately, it just doesn't seem like he's really catching on. I mean, he's apparently not putting on a whole lot of weight and just not really performing very well in practice, which is unfortunate. I know that we were all really excited for him, and I really hope that he can come back and maybe get into a better situation. Maybe he needs to transfer or something. But that being said, Bryce Underwood, he really does have actual pressure on him, and I don't think that it's manufactured. I think that Michigan really does need him to perform at a certain level so that they can have that proof of concept to future quarterbacks. They do actually have a couple of fairly good quarterbacks coming in the 26 and 27 class, if I'm not mistaken. I know Brady Smeagol, whatever his name is coming in the 26 class, and he's pretty good. They're looking at a 27 quarterback who's also very good. So it could be a wash in terms of recruiting goes, but then it still comes back to in-season performance. And is Bryce Underwood going to be able to shoulder all of the weight for Michigan football to perform this year? And it sounds like coaches, analysts, pundits are all pretty confident in that. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that it's not just the coaches who are saying all of these positives about Underwood. It's pundits, it's analysts, it's journalists at a lot of different places are saying Bryce Underwood is very good and very mature and seems like he's ready. But you can't shake the fact that he's a true freshman. So I think, in my humble opinion, keep your expectations high because it sounds like there's a really good shot that he meets them. But also be okay with the fact that Bryce Underwood is probably going to make some mistakes. They might drop the Oklahoma game. They might. I don't think that they will, but if it happens, that's okay. He's not going to spiral. They're going to develop his confidence as the season goes along, and then once they get to the Ohio State game and some of the bigger Big Ten games, I think he'll be just fine. And we're going to leave it right there. What do you think about Bryce Underwood? What are your expectations? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Again, join us 8:30 Wednesday nights. Come and join us in the chat there, and we will catch you in the next video.